Hello BookTube, Books with Banks back again with another video, another Malazan video today, and today we're looking at a scene from Book 2 in Steven Erikson's Kharkanas Trilogy, Fall of Light. I have seen readings and analysis videos on my channel from every other novel Erikson has written in the Malazan universe, so if you're interested in what scenes I chose to analyze from all of those works, you can check out all of those videos and more over on my channel. But for now, we'll be looking at a scene from just past the halfway point in Fall of Light, the beginning of chapter 18, pages 710 to 715 in this Bantam mass market paperback edition. I will say that this has light spoilers for the overall course of events and the political tensions and climate in Corralled Glen, the setting of these books. However, there's no major spoilers as far as like the fates of any characters or anything twisty or surprising like that. I really do want to keep these, at least these first couple scene analysis videos on this book, a little less spoilery, just in case anyone has a lot more hesitation jumping into either the book one in this trilogy or this one. They are a little denser, and there's just a slightly higher barrier to entry, I think, for this series. So if watching any of these videos can be sort of like a teaser, sort of like a way to spark a little bit more interest from the community, people who have read Malazan or people who are just looking to get into anything and all things Malazan, then I hope these videos can help. So proceed at your own comfort level with these light-ish spoilers. To set up the scene, we're in the viewpoint of Rise Harriet, the Kharkanas court historian, and he's thinking on the history and craft of sculpting and the work of sculptors in past ages in Thais society. So, here we go. There had been an age, perhaps a century back, when artists had turned their talents to working in stone and bronze. As if stung by the prodigious masterpieces raised up by the Azathanai, and in particular the high mason Kaladin brood, these Taist artists had pursued techniques to match, if not surpass, the efforts of their neighbors. In the pursuit of realism, and in the conjuration of natural forms elevated into a kind of aesthetic perfection, the use of plaster casting upon living, breathing models had been perfected. The art form had burgeoned in a spectacular, albeit brief, flurry of statuary that saw works proliferating throughout the public spaces of Kharkanas and in the gardens, grand halls, and courtyards of the nobility. But any civilization that saw art as a kind of cultural competition was, to Rise Harriet's mind, well down the road to disillusion, and the collapse of statuary as a form of artistic expression came on the day that a Taist merchant returned from the lands of the Azathanai, transporting in her train a new work by some unknown Azathanai sculptor. If the Azathanai had been paying attention to the Taist sculptors, they had been unmoved. The idealization of the Taist form, the body transformed into marble or bronze and thereby stripped of its mortality, was a kind of conceit, possibly defiant, probably diffident. The work that had been brought into Kharkanas was massive, wrought in rough bronze. It bore sharp, jagged edges. It writhed with panic and fury. Upon a broad, flat pedestal, a dozen hounds surrounded a single hound. And that beast, in the center of the storm, was dying. Its companions tore into its flanks, sank fangs into its hide, pulling, stretching, and tearing. Okay, so first break here. And if the comedians Prazik and Dathanar earlier in this book can use white and black crows as a metaphor to contemplate the tensions between Leosin and Andy, here now we see how the royal historian, Rise Harriet, is thinking about marble and bronze statues in much the same way. But his train of thought actually turns towards a critique, less of the specific details of the current political situation and more towards a critique of progress and what artistic movements can tell us about any civilization's view of itself and its view of its own, that civilization's own progress, whether or not things are getting better, that sort of thing. So, Rise Herod is considering how delusional all of the statuary was that idealized the Teist form. The Teist were using art to hide their insecurities. They wanted to show the rest of the world how great their civilization was through their art. But when all they were showing was an idealized version of themselves, it was just a lie, really. And I just love that he says this attitude towards art was, quote, possibly defiant, probably diffident, where on one hand, defiance has a stronger connotation, more of a, no, this is how beautiful and strong we really are. But then, on the other hand, diffidence has that weaker, more critical, self-critical kind of connotation, more of like a please believe we're this strong and beautiful. We're not really sure that we are, but maybe this artwork can help prove that we are. Please, does anyone believe us? That sort of thing. And I think Herod introduces a great point here about how civilizations often want to believe in their progress and success so badly that they're willing to delude themselves through things like their artwork. But then Herod remembers the introduction of a new sculpture that shook everyone to their core, because even though it was a bit more abstract and metaphorical and coming from outside of their society, it was a much more powerful and evocative work, and it just worked better in its social critique than any of the idealized statues ever could. So this begs the question then, is it more important for artists to glorify or criticize the world around them? And I think we can assume how Rise Herod would feel on this point. But anyway, continuing on. Galen told the tale of a score or so of Kharkanas' finest sculptors, all gathering in the private courtyard where stood the Azathanai bronze. Some had railed, filling the air with spiteful condemnation, or voicing their sniffing contempt for the raw hand that had sculpted this monstrosity. A few others had fallen silent, their gazes fixed upon the work. Only one, a master artist considered by most to be the finest sculptor in Corald Galen, had wept. Among the Teist, art had given shape to an ideal, but stone never betrayed. Bronze could not deceive. The ideal, made to kneel to political assertions of superiority, had, almost overnight, descended into mockery. By this, Galen had said, perfection is made mortal once again. By this, our conceit dulls. The Azathanai bronze, deemed offensive, had been removed from public display. Eventually, it had found its way into a crypt beneath the citadel, a broad, low-ceilinged room, now home to scores of other works, that Galen had named the Tarnished Chamber. Okay, second break here. This last bit just puts, I think, a finer point on what I was talking about a moment ago. Also, I love how Erikson has really taken the time with introducing us to this scene, because we're more than a page into this chapter, into this scene, and now we're finally getting to see where Rise Herod is standing in this Tarnished Chamber, and more of the immediate reason for his thinking about all of these statues. Moving on. The historian had set 3 lanterns down, casting sharp light upon 3 sides of the Azathanai bronze, which someone had rather uninspiringly called the savaging of the hound. He had then circled the work, studying it from varying heights and angles. He had made a window with his hands to block out all but the details. He had drawn close to smell the metal and its patina of greasy dust, and had set fingertips against the verdigris where it coated the beasts like mange. Despite the steady, unwavering light, the animals seemed to blur with motion, spinning round their snarling victim. He had read from some treatise that, if seen from above, it was clear that the circling hounds actually formed an inward spiral of flesh and rending canines, and the scholar had gone on to suggest, to a subsequent chorus of disbelief, that the animal in the center, by virtue of its own writhing, twisted form, was itself spiraling inward. The man's final outrage was to wonder if the sculpture depicted not many beasts, but one, an animal destroying itself, turning round and ever inward into a vortex of self-annihilation. For the historian, the only appalling thing about the scholar's interpretation was its plausibility. After all, had the artist not sought to convey a hidden meaning with this scene, the beast in the center of this violent storm would have been a stag, perhaps, or a bull. Okay, another break. So civilization destroying itself, turning in on itself, being the death of itself. And that's really the whole point of this entire prequel trilogy, I think. Erikson showing us exactly how such a thing might happen and how heartbreaking it can be to watch such a thing happen. And as much as Erikson's work of art here, this book, can make us, the readers, think about these sorts of things, the hound sculpture in the book is the piece of art that's making Rhys Harriott think about these things. So I think we can say pretty confidently that Erikson wants his books to be more like this Azathanai sculpture than anything like the idealized Tice stuff, more like something that's criticizing society as opposed to a work of art that's glorifying society. Moving on. Though he heard the door to the chamber squeal with motion, Rhys Harriott did not round until the newcomer spoke. "Here, historian? In the name of Dark, why?" Rhys Harriott shrugged. "It is private enough." Satterpool grunted. "The only spies in the Citadel are our own." "Yes, curious that, after all, isn't the purpose of spying the protection of our own people? Have we descended into insouciance so far, priest, as to claim with a straight face that we are protecting our people from themselves?" The round-faced man pursed his lips and then waved dismissively. Rhys Harriott smiled. "Oh, deadly language, how so you offend me?" Scowling, Satterpool said, "Remind me not of that wretched man, our court coward, our sneering seneschal of high mages. His elevation was short-lived. I will stand in his stead." The historian turned back to the savaging of the hound. "Do you recall this, priest? Before my time. It is ghastly. No wonder it hides here. Only in darkness could you now bless this. Douse the lights. We've no need of them." "It is Azathanai." "Is it now? Well, then, yes, I can see why you'd be curious." "All the others in here, however, are Ticed." Satterpool waved dismissively. "Every fad fades in time, historian. If you would be the purveyor of hoary frenzies from before the age of modern enlightenment, then make a study of this chamber. Line the statues into a library of stone and moldy bronze. Drag up a desk, light a candle, and pen your treatise." "And what treatise would that be, priest?" Satterpool shrugged, glancing around. "The past is a litany of naive expectations. But at last we are now much wiser." "Just so. Well, there are indeed some, even other scholars, who find comfort in the belief that past ages in history can be seen as phases of our childhood, thus absolving them of knowing any better, and thus absolving us in the present of any lingering sense that maybe, once, long ago, life was better than it is now. Is this the reason for summoning me? I'd rather a rough drought on a tattered scroll set upon my desk, where I can get to it a few decades from now, when at last I have the time." "Yes, I'm sure," Rhys Harriott replied, still studying the Azathanai bronze. "But things are not better, are they?" He turned, waved a hand in a broad sweep. "See here, in our tarnished chamber, our surrendered ideals. Such childish optimism." Okay, another break here. So with the introduction of the priest Satterpool, Erikson's given Rhys Harriott someone to converse with and bounce ideas off of. But let's talk about progress for a minute, and how the idea of progress and modernity fits into this scene. Satterpool says, and I quote, "If you would be the purveyor of hoary frenzies from before the age of modern enlightenment, then make a study of this chamber." So it would seem the priest believes they are in this era of modern enlightenment, and I think Satterpool, and many other Ticed for that matter, probably believe in this overwhelming philosophy of progress, that the march of history is constantly moving away from the terrible past and towards the ideal future. But I think the mistake Satterpool and many people often make here is that they uphold the current situation, the modern day, the present day, as this beautiful example of progress, so much better than what has come before, an age of enlightenment. And in doing so, Satterpool isn't any better than the sculptors making their idealized representations of Ticed society. Sure, a lot of great things can come with modernity and invention and progress, and this kind of Kantian sort of shift from barbarism into civilization, but terrible things come of it too. Kind of for a real world example, think about just like, because an area like civil liberties, things might be getting better, but in other areas like human affected global warming, radiation from nuclear energy, things are, in those cases, getting a lot worse. So in other words, Setterpool represents those who uphold this idea of modernity as some great thing to make beautiful statues of, whereas Rise Herod represents those more skeptical of modernity, those who think things haven't necessarily gotten better, those we might call postmodern, in fact, who can appreciate and interpret the meaning of a work of art depicting a symbolic representation of a civilization destroying itself, more than they can appreciate the ideal statue. Now, I don't want to derail this too much here, but I do think Rise Herod is basically a postmodern historian inserted into this world. And because he doesn't belong, he's kind of left frozen in a bit of an identity crisis, too petrified to even write any more history, also too petrified to influence current events. And I'd say for more though, on any kind of postmodernism stuff in Erikson's works. If you haven't already, please go check out Andy Smith's amazing video on postmodernism in Malazan. If you haven't checked that out already, it's a must-watch. Anyway, moving on. Setterpool began turning away. "If that is all, speak to me of sorcery." The priest paused, twisted to regard him. "What do you wish to know?" "The reach of your power, your control over it. And in this you are taking an academic interest?" "No, in this I work at the bidding of the High Priestess." A faint shadow seemed to crease Setterpool's cherubic features, as if showing, in an unguarded instant, his old man's face belonging to some distant future. "She has cause to doubt me now? Perhaps it is our newfound need, priest, to protect us from ourselves. Cast me in the cloak of a spy, familiar ground to ease your discomfort. As court seneschal, I will not embarrass her." "Then you claim to some prowess." "I claim sufficient confidence." "I think, Setterpool, that both prowess and confidence have swept away the young, cheerful man that I once knew. Is there more you would ask me? Who is your enemy?" "My enemy? If you are gathering power, those streams of sorcery, against whom will you unleash it?" "I am a servant of Mother Dark." "That kind of servant she has not asked for, Setterpool." The priest suddenly bared his teeth. "Ah, yes, I recall now. Your mysterious audience with Mother Dark in the company of Lanier and that Azathanai. But the details of that meeting? Why, none of you deigned to inform me, or anyone else for that matter. I hear that you earned Lord Silch's ruin's ire, and even this did not sway you. Thus, a well of secret knowing that you can draw from at will, as it suits your moment of need. You already know enough. She refused Lord Enamander's desire to march on Sander. She commanded him to keep sheathed his sword. Am I to be commanded to do nothing as well? If so, then let her speak such words to me. And if I told you that we did not speak with Mother Dark, that our journey ended abruptly, and that we were guided out from that realm by Lord Draconis, then you further undermine your authority to advise me on her behalf." A surge of anger silenced Rise Herod. He turned back to study the Azathanai bronze, breathing deeply as he mastered his emotions. Authority? Oh, how we all strained to see into the darkness, pleading for its heavy but sure hand, settled well upon one shoulder, guiding us on to the true path. "I will be the seneschal," said Setterpool. "I will be the authority when it comes to the collective sorcerous capabilities of the Citadel of the Teist Andi. And whose authority supersedes your own?" "Mother Dark's, of course. I'd better await her guidance." "Knowing that it will not come, Setterpool, am I witness to a usurpation of power? When Lord Enamander returns to Kharkanas, historian, I will announce to him that I stand at his side, and that is the express wish. It is the express wish of the seneschal that he draw his blade, that he fight in the name of Mother Dark. And upon the field of battle, why, there I will stand with my cadre to lend magic to his might." Okay, another quick break here. This whole last section, I think, has really been to show how Setterpool is getting more and more involved in the political scheming of the situation, trying to secure more and more power for himself. And I think from everything we've seen up to now, we could say he genuinely is a patriot who is, for the most part, loyal to Mother Dark, and he's going to try and use this new magical power in defense of her and her honor and her relationship with the Draconis. However, we're hearing about all of this through the skeptical lens of Rhys Harriott, who, the historian, he is far too uncomfortable with manipulating the fraught situation for any kind of personal gain of his own. Unlike Setterpool, Harriott is trying to pay attention to the messages of the more critical artwork of the past, and he's terrified by his interpretation and the implications. So finally, to finish up the scene, Rhys Harriott focused anew on the savaging of the hound. He could almost hear its howls. Not many, but one, and no end to this violence but death's sure promise. That merchant, she said that she'd paid nothing for it, that the unknown sculptor among the Azathani offered it as a gift to the Teist. Ideals are like a bitch hound. What she spawns might prove vicious, what she spawns might, in time, turn upon her. Is this what this work announces? No, but I will read into it what I choose, and by that choice, the language of art can never die. All it takes is a little effort, but then, whenever has that exhortation convinced anyone? After a long moment, Setterpool said, "Report back to the High Priestess. Ensure that she understands." Of course. He listened to the man walk away, the echoes of his footfalls filling the unlit spaces between marble and bronze. Chambers that came to house forgotten works of art, Rhys Harriott reflected, were little more than repositories of sorrow, and all the more heartbreaking if this was where innocence was lost. He decided that he would not return. Alright, so there you have it. That's the scene. And I think the way this scene ends is heartbreaking because it's basically Rhys Harriott realizing how upsetting their current political situation is and how hopeless it is, how hopeless he is to really do anything to change it. He's turning all the way away from more optimistic ideas of success and capabilities of the modern era, and he's turning away from all of that because of his interpretation of a work of art. And honestly, that's a little beautiful too. Back in the 1800s, when scholars were trying to make history more of an actual profession, they wanted it to be more empirical and scientific. Surely all the principles of logic applied to science in the modern era would lend themselves to the study of the past and of historical events, right? Wrong. I think, more than anything, that this scene demonstrates how much works of art can influence historians and their telling of history. This is a very postmodern idea in its own right, at least as far as postmodernism goes for the history field. I guess to sum it up a little better, the belief is that history is closer to literature than science, and is more inspired by cultural movements like art than it is by any kind of empirical research method. But that's a position I personally believe in myself, that it is closer to literature than science. It's just heartbreaking to see how Rhys Harriott is so, in turn, heartbroken over the impending fate of his people in light of all of his revelations. Okie dokie. Sorry if that was a little bit more historical theory-esque and dense-ish than I usually get, but I love this stuff, and I love reading about Erikson's interpretations of these theories and how he's using them to flesh out kind of the more scholarly academic corner and those characters in his worlds. And this is just another great scene from my favorite book of 2022 so far. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. All that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye.